The Cubs have arrived. They have finally decided to join the conversation amongst the other big market clubs, and they are now on track to have a big 2026. Welcome back to Second City Sports Talk. I'm Wyatt, and let's get after it. The Cubs have made a statement during the Bears game on Saturday night. It looks bad. It looks dark. And out of nowhere, Jeff Passan, John Heyman, they drop on Twitter that Alex Bregman has signed with the Cubs on a 5-year, $175 million contract. And hey, that point may have just turned the tide for two Chicago sports teams. And if you look at this Bregman deal, it's actually not as daunting as it appears. Like I said, 5 years, $175 million, which would account to about $35 million annual average value. But there are close to $70 million being deferred of this contract, so almost close to half of it is in deferred money. So present day value for Alex Bregman is only around $30 million a year, which keeps the Cubs under the daunting luxury tax, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But just some early thoughts on this. I mean, Alex Bregman is the player this team was lacking. You know, apart from his off-the-field presence of being a leader in the clubhouse, being the guy you can depend on to lead and take control of this team in dark times, he is one of the best just pure hitters in the game. Elite contact numbers. I mean, we're talking a 360 on base percentage last year. 462 slug, not great, but he's going to get on base. Very good chase rate, walk rate. This is the all-around hitter that you want on your team. Very similar profile to Nico Hoerner, but he has more pop. And these two should make for a very, very deadly combination. That is, if the Cubs can hang on to Nico Hoerner, which we will also talk about in just a little bit. Now, I said Alex Bregman really wasn't much of a power hitter, and albeit that may be true, Wrigley Field does, you could say, cater to his swing habits. Now, he is a pull hitter. Look, the corners at Wrigley Field are some of the deepest in all of baseball, if not the deepest in baseball. But the power alley, left center field, that is a right-handed hitter's paradise. Somewhere that Alex Bregman can really take advantage of into the bleachers in, like I said, left center field on a warm day at Wrigley Field. And look, Wrigley has played like a pitcher's park the last couple years to that certain extreme. And having a guy like Bregman who, yes, can take advantage of that short power alley, but he can also slash the ball around like Nico Hoerner. You need a contact play. You need a hit and run and hit. Bregman is the guy to do that. Now, we can't just talk about the positives. I mean, it's mostly positives. The Cubs got Alex Bregman. This is that ceiling-raising, and I would even say floor-raising player that this team had lacked with the loss of Kyle Tucker. Some may say he's going to be 32 this year. We could see a decline. But if you look at Bregman's profile, a very contact, just all-around solid hitter profile, someone very similar to a Michael Brantley or JD Martinez with a little less power. I mean, look at how those guys aged. There is no telling. You know, Bregman is probably going to age very well, just like those two. The skill set he has of being a contact, all-around hitter really plays as you get older. So I would not be worried about Bregman's performance necessarily as he ages. I think he's going to age, you know, just like wine, just like Justin Verlander. And really, there isn't much concern with this. He has a no-trade clause. He wants to be here. Bregman chose to come to the Cubs over the Red Sox, even though it was rumored that the Cubs offered about $10 million more than Boston. But still, this is the move this team needed to make. There really aren't many negatives to it. He's going to age well. He's going to play well. He's going to have good defense, good offense. And he's going to be the leader in this clubhouse. This truly was a monumental week for the Cubs after a pretty lackluster offseason, spending around $30-ish million on a couple of relievers. The Cubs got their starting pitcher that they needed, something that I had talked about previously this winter where, you know, I thought the plan was all along going to be to trade for a starting pitcher and sign a bat, cough, cough, Alex Bregman, and it ended up coming to fruition. Earlier this week, the Cubs acquired right-handed fireballer Edward Cabrera from the Miami Marlins in exchange for prize prospect Owen Casey, alongside a couple of younger minor leaguers. This is the move this team needed to make. Edward Cabrera is by no means a finished product, but he has just immense potential, the most potential of all the pitchers on this team to truly be an ace. This is the missing piece to this rotation, and he offers something that no other Cubs pitcher could offer. Edward Cabrera offers a ceiling-raising potential. And if you look at what the other Cubs pitchers don't have compared to what he has, he misses bats. He has ace, blow past just stuff. And if you look at some of his numbers from 2025, we're talking a 30% chase rate, 29% whiff rate, 26% strikeout rate, and a 47% ground ball rate. All of those things are going to greatly benefit the Cubs. A rotation outside of ground ball rate just doesn't really have a lot of. They don't have swing and miss stuff apart from Cade Horton. This is the move. This is the piece to elevate this starting rotation. Yes, it's a big gamble. Cabrera has immense injury history. He is injury prone, specifically with his elbow. That is a very scary injury, a very scary part of the body with a starting pitcher. And you know what? This is the gamble this team needed to make. The Cubs were in a position to take a risk on a guy like Cabrera, a pitcher who could really raise the ceiling. If everything goes right, he's your number one pitcher. He's maybe a top 10 pitcher in baseball. If everything goes wrong, there was probably an injury involved, and you say, hey, we took this shot. It didn't work, but at least we took the shot, and Cabrera was the shot to take. Again, the potential is there with Edward Cabrera to truly be this something else, this difference maker, this ace that the Cubs just have not seen for a long time. I'd even make the argument, you probably going back to prime Jake Arrieta with just being a dominant, hard-throwing pitcher who misses bats. Look, Cabrera only threw 137 and 2/3 innings in 2025. He dealt with some arm issues around the trade deadline. He's never made over 26 starts in a season, but he had 150 strikeouts in those 137 innings this year. He's going to miss bats. High injury potential there as well, but this was a risk the Cubs needed to take. He's got the best stuff automatically on this staff. If you were going to draft, just do a team Cubs draft, the first player you would take would be Edward Cabrera, solely based on his stuff. This is an exciting move for the Cubs, and I cannot wait to see his first start this spring and just see him at Sloan Park and Mesa, see the nasty stuff this pitcher has. Now, automatically adding a guy like Edward Cabrera, a guy like Alex Bregman, it just moves the needle with this team. These are two major offseason acquisitions. You go from acquiring a bunch of, middle to high leverage relievers, a bench bat in Tyler Austin, to going in, pouncing on the opportunity to get truly impactful players. And this has just made for an extremely successful offseason. In years past, the biggest thing with this team has been, yes, they've gotten the role player guys. Your Holby Milners, your Phil Matons, your Tyler Austins, your Hunter Harveys. But they didn't go out. They didn't go beyond. They didn't get the extra mile done with players like Cabrera, Alex Bregman. And the difference now, the Cubs have not just gotten their role players, they've gotten their stars for 2026. Somehow the Cubs did this all. They made all these major acquisitions while staying under the first tier of the luxury tax, the daunting first tier of the luxury tax, something that Cubs chairman Tom Ricketts has just refused to go over intentionally since, the golden era of the Cubs. And I think you have to give Jed Hoyer his flowers here. He was able to make all these moves while staying under the tax. The Cubs currently have about $3.5 million, just enough wiggle room, just enough breathing room to that $245 million first tier. Around then, the Cubs are at about $240 million in luxury tax payroll. Like I said, about $3.5–4 million away from that first tier. It does not give them a lot of margin for error here. If the Cubs want to make a move at the trade deadline, as of now, they really don't have much wiggle room, which makes me worry a bit that we could see some salary shedding before opening day. Now, with very little wiggle room, with very little margin of error toward that first tier of the luxury tax, you could see some players on the move in areas that this team has an abundance in. And I want to start with the one player that has been giving me some nerves. A player that has been on a lot of people's trade radars. He should not be. That is Nico Hoerner. Now, Hoerner is owed about $11.5 million in 2026. He's an unrestricted free agent after this year. And look, this is the glue of this team. Nico Hoerner is everything that the Cubs organization just surrounds itself, wants to be. He's a gritty player. He's going to play hard. He's going to do everything well besides hit for power, but that's not needed with him. He's one of the most reliable contact hitters in baseball. I'd put Nico Hoerner up against anyone, the taking it bat against Josh Hader, the upper echelon relievers in Major League Baseball. He's going to come through in the clutch. He is the clutchest player on this team. And losing a player like that, not even mentioning his off-the-field impact on this team, would just be absolutely catastrophic. And by trading Hoerner, how are you getting better in 2026? It's basically a horizontal move. You're not getting better. You're just substituting one player for another. In this situation, you have Matt Shaw moving over to second base for Hoerner, who would be traded, Bush at first base, Swanson at shortstop, and of course Alex Bregman at third. You're not really getting better in that situation. You're just swapping Bregman in for Hoerner, which is just why? Why sign Bregman if you're just going to trade Nico Hoerner? It really wouldn't make a difference, which is why I don't think the Cubs are going to do this. Why would you go out, spend this money to upgrade at a position, third base position, if you're just going to trade another good player who is equally, if not even more valuable? Doesn't make any sense. I don't see it happening, but it is definitely something that had to be addressed. And speaking of Matt Shaw, he's another player that I could see getting moved. He's not making a lot of money. The only rationale would be to reset the farm system, but Shaw is one of these prized prospects, even though he's graduated up until this point. It really wouldn't make any sense to trade Matt Shaw. Yeah, I do think there is one realistic trade piece on this team to shed salary, and that comes from a position of extreme abundance. That is Colin Ray. Now, Ray is owed about $6.5 million in 2026. Could easily see the Cubs dumping that salary. They have a lot of depth at the starting pitching position, and I could see Colin Ray out the door to shed some salary to give about $10-ish million to that first tier of the luxury tax. If any player is going to be traded away to shed salary, I think Colin Ray is the player to go. But the bottom line here is 2026 is an all-in year for the Cubs. I know Jed Hoyer, Tom Ricketts, they never like to use the expression all-in, but this is as close as all-in as you're going to see from the Cubs. Right up to the first tier of the luxury tax, you have a looming lockout in 2027. This is arguably the best roster that Jed Hoyer has put together as Cubs president since 2020. And I am just excited to see how this turns out. This is, you could say, the fight he has been building up for. This is his final battle. Like I said, with the looming lockout, with all the uncertainty beyond this season, this is his best roster on paper and the Cubs' best chance to really make a dent in the National League and all of Major League Baseball.